and then taking those elements and adding in inviolable physical laws, and that's enough to explain everything that happens. Well, that's not explanation. That's simplification. And it's appealing intellectually, and it's mathematizable, it's quantifiable. But real complexity, real beauty, real reality, the real future is a synthesis of overall unity and extensive complexity. This is contained in Teilhard's maxim, true union differentiates. Omega is the true unifier of all of cosmic reality, but it's not a simplifier. It doesn't reduce it. It gives back every particle its individuality. So that's the ideal of unity and overall intelligibility in Teilhard.
We're going to jump over to the chat here for a moment, and then we have some more questions in the room. So we're I'm sorry. Let's go to one from the chat, and then we'll come back to the room here. So a question here: how can we encourage others to shift their mindset from perfection diminished by sin to co-creative zest towards evolution?
We need a new moral theology that's not based on imperatives or categorical imperatives or sense of duty implanted by God in us. We need to make the foundation of our morality what enhances life. And this is what I see in a lot of ecological morality today. Thomas Perry talks about the mutual self-enhancement of humans and the earth, something along that line. And it has to make the category of relationality fundamental. To be is to be related, to be free. Freedom means the capacity to relate. And maximum freedom, which we attribute to God, is infinite relatability. So in that sense, God is perfect and immutable. God's immutability, God's consistency, consists of God's always enhancing relationships. And we need a moral theology which enhances relationality. I think it does that. Some do it better than others, but I think there's room for a metaphysics. I call it a metaphysics of the future, a metaphysics in which the really real world consists not of an eternal static perfection from the beginning, but the real perfection consists of an open-ended capacity to cultivate relationships. And that's how I think Teilhard understood Omega. God Omega and Christ Omega is Omega in relationship. So relationality would be a fundamental category of moral theology, I think. There's more to be said than that. This is an oversimplification.
Okay, we're going to go back to the room here. We have a question.
Yes. I'm a little confused because you talk about us as human beings, as sentient beings, but I think most of us in this room are of the age that Catholicism taught us that after we go to heaven and to eternity.
Most of us, I'm sorry, I can't. Most of us.
This? Okay. Can you hear this?
Yeah.
Okay.
You think that most of us what?
I'm confused because you talk about the second law of thermodynamics, which is inverse proportion, which means in the simple form, if you're in an airplane and you go up too high, you're going to explode, which is why most people blow up. I'm a medical practitioner and a scientist.
Yeah.
So and planes are only regulated for 8,000 feet. So we're 20, 30,000 feet. That's why many elderly people have problems with, their legs falling, et cetera, et cetera. So which means ultimately at some level you explode. Everything explodes. It's over, finished. However, what I'm confused with is most of us in this room as Catholics were taught that death is upon death where we really reach, heaven, nirvana. And in the history of mankind, people only lived to 20, 30 years. So I'm leaving in 2 weeks to go to Stanford University with the finest minds, doctors, nurses, scientists, and physicists to work on AI, artificial intelligence, to help early dementia, which is the third reason that people die in the world. So you never mention death. You never mention going to heaven, which is what we're taught is the ultimate bliss.
Never mentioned going to where?
Heaven.
Okay.
Dying, death,
Yeah.
the ultimate bliss. So you talk about Omega and this earth, but I will share with you, then I'll shut up. In my work with hospice, I find bliss at the moment that my patients die. And that's where they find nirvana and another universe, je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, I didn't talk about that, and that's a very good question. I can perhaps say a few words about it. I mentioned at the beginning that what I'm looking for is what Teilhard calls the secret essence of the universe that is garnered somewhere, and it's garnered in Omega. So what is that secret essence? One way of looking at it is to say that entropy, even though it seems to be bad news by promising the decay of everything, entropy is what makes possible the grand story of the universe. How? Entropy implies that the collapse or the loss of usable or available energy is irreversible. But it's that irreversibility that gives to time its irreversible quality. And the physicist Carlo Rossi talks about this in one of his books, that entropy means that there will be an irreversible sequence of moments from past to present to future. And that's the stuff of story. And the thing about story is that it can carry a meaning. When we hear a story or read a story, notice how we're constantly anticipating where it's going. We need to look at the universe like that. And we're allowed to now as a result of relativity physics and Big Bang physics. We're allowed to see the universe as a story. And we should have the attitude of looking or anticipating where it's going. But within that overall story, there are our stories, our lives, all of which are stories as well. And even though I didn't talk about it tonight, Teilhard certainly is one of the many modern theologians who speculate that in some sense, resurrection, Hans Küng did this in one of his books, his book on death, Hans Küng, the famous Catholic theologian, where he talked about how one way of understanding resurrection is that our stories are taken in to God Omega. He did, this is Teilhardian language. Küng did not know Teilhard very well, but he would have agreed that what happens or what can happen at death, and we could live our lives with this hope, is that my story will never be lost. It will be garnered somewhere. There's a whole theology called process theology based on ideas of Alfred North Whitehead and Charles Hartshorne that think of God not only as the stimulus that calls the universe into existence, but also as the feeling that takes everything that happens in nature, and everything in a sense is a feeling. Everything has some sort of minimal subjectivity to it that is felt by God. And so that the possibility of a life beyond death would be one of not separate souls fleeing off into eternity, but a whole universe taken into the life of God, and that our destiny, Teilhard would say, is no longer separate from cosmic destiny. That's one way of looking at it anyway. Our destiny is not, our story is inseparable from the cosmic story. What we need to do in our eschatology, in our theology of hope, is not be so individualistic, but to be more cosmic and to hope for the future of the universe. And that will take care of us in the process. And that kind of thinking is important in moral theology, especially ecologically, to realize that what we're doing to our planet, we're doing to the cosmic story. We're keeping it from developing. When we're cutting off the systems of life from having a future, that's sinful, more sinful than we used to believe. And so, but if we have a cosmic hope, or even if we have a hope for the earth, which is something you can't have, I don't think, without a cosmic hope. If we have a cosmic hope, that should make us more aware of what we are doing to this story, whose secret essence is being felt by the infinite compassion of God. So that's one way of dealing with death from a Teilhardian point of view.
We're going to go over here for maybe a couple more questions before we start to wrap up.
I was really intrigued by your schematic that sort of laid out the pure faith of science early in the lecture. And as I was reflecting on that, I was wondering if within that schematic, is engineering the original sin?
Bad engineering would be, but not necessarily good engineering. So, I didn't have time to really get to how Teilhard would finesse that, but if you have a minute or two, I could perhaps, no, that's okay. I'll take questions. But what Teilhard would say, theology needs to respond not only to the question, why is the universe intelligible, but also the question, why is it so hard to understand? Why is intelligibility so hard to grasp? Why is truth so easily distorted? That's what he wants to ask. And you can answer those questions if you understand the universe as not perfect, but as still coming into being. If it's still coming into being, anything that's still coming into being is incomplete. It's imperfect. It's not yet perfected. And that means everything that's coming into being has a dark side to it. And evil gets its foothold in the fact of an unfinished universe, in the sense that the universe has a dark side to it. And we have the freedom to choose the darkness over the light. And that's our dignity in the scheme of things. But bad engineering can do that. So we have, I think Teilhard's thought has functioned for some engineers, some Christian engineers, as a framework for understanding and appreciating their work and what they should be doing with their lives. But it's especially congenial, I think, to the ecological movement and how we need to have green technology everywhere. Justifies green morality in a way that, as far as I'm concerned, no other thinker has done, in the Christian world at least.
Thank you very much for this. I had the good fortune as a 19-year-old college student to take a whole course on Teilhard de Chardin, and we read all his books, and it really transformed me.
Where was this?
At Villanova.
Oh, okay.
1979.
This wasn't Emily Benz, was it? Was it Emily Benz?
It was, yes, it was.
Oh, I guess she was a good friend of mine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's an arc that has affected me every day of my life. I mean, not just spiritually, but intellectually. And I'm a clinical psychologist.
Yeah.
And, you're talking about hope, and I'm thinking at the micro and the macro level. And one of the things that has really intrigued me, and I could go off on a million different thought streams, but is some developments in neuroscience. So there's, quantum mechanics, the macro, But the rise of the interest in contemplative and compassion practices in secular settings, as well as sort of in psychology, for example, there's a big integration now of wisdom traditions and science.
Yeah.
And everything I filter through the works of Teilhard. And so I've wondered, he would talk about the evolution of consciousness, and that once consciousness arose, in a sense, we become responsible for it. And I've often wondered, if this is one of those things that helps give us some taste of
Some
taste of this
zest.
West.
Good.
Another great influence was Thomas Keating, when I sort of rediscovered, contemplative practices. But he would talk about that, sort of that little taste. And if, again, internet and all these ways that we are connected, but also disconnected. And the connection that occurs in silence, in contemplation, that is beyond words, that is beyond labels, that is beyond divisiveness. If the interest now is some way of advancing, moving forward with this evolution of consciousness. So I think there was a question somewhere in there.
No, I appreciate just the testimony. Whenever I hear this kind of testimony, it warms my heart. So thank you very much.
Well, again, we thank Dr. Haught for his phenomenal presentation, for all of your very rich questions, and for his very thoughtful responses to those. So